Morning everybody, welcome to this morning's assembly. We've got some more music this week, so I'd like to thank Dharma for playing us in while we settle down. Thank you, Dharma. It's nice to hear that music there as we all settle down. So I've just got a couple of announcements before I start on my assembly. First of all, just to remind you that this Friday is a bank holiday. It was moved initially from Monday to Friday this week to celebrate VE Day. I'm sure there'll be lots in the media about that on Friday. But there will, of course, be no lessons on Friday, so you get Friday off. Perhaps do a little bit of revision to get ready for your end-of-year exams, but also perhaps to rest a little bit as well. And I also wanted to congratulate all of those that got involved in house cross country. Congratulations to Sherwin's boys who won the boys race, and congratulations to Whites who won the girls race. Also congratulations to the several members of staff that got involved, and I'm told that Whites won the staff competition also, so congratulations to Whites in more than one area there. So this week in our assembly we're going to continue with the aim of trying to develop good judgment. You'll recall that good judgment is the intellectual characteristic that we're looking at all of this half term. And so this morning I've got two case studies that I thought we could look at. We've got a real success story. I want to do that second. We'll start with one case study which actually shows when judgment can go wrong and a failure. Okay, so let's look at the failure first then. I'm going to take us all the way back to British colonial rule of India and the city of Delhi in particular. So British officials were concerned with the number of cobra snakes in Delhi at that time. Of course, cobra snakes are very dangerous. And they wanted to reduce that number of cobra snakes, so they clearly understood their aim. And you remember from my assembly last week that I gave you a framework for understanding good judgment, 5 steps in that framework, and the first of those steps was to understand your aim. So the aim in this case was actually relatively straightforward. They wanted to reduce the number of cobra snakes in the city. So their idea was to start paying people to hand in dead cobras. It was a reward, if you like, a bounty. So every dead cobra that was handed in by somebody in the city to one of the officials was rewarded with some money. They got paid for doing that. And initially that seemed to be really successful. Lots of cobra snakes were being handed in, and the British officials sat back seemingly very pleased with themselves. They expected, of course, over a period of time that the number of cobra snakes being handed in would reduce as the number of cobras in the city reduced. But sadly that wasn't the case, and actually what they saw was the number of cobra snakes in the city increasing. The number of snakes being handed in was getting bigger and not smaller. Of course that puzzled them a little bit, so they started to investigate why that might be. And it turned out that there were a number of very entrepreneurial people within Delhi who had seized this opportunity to make a little bit of money. So they had captured cobra snakes, but then they had started to use their captured cobra snakes to breed more cobra snakes. And so they had lots of cobra snakes which they could then give to the authorities and get rewards for. So some people had actually started making a living out of breeding cobra snakes, handing them into the authorities and getting the bounty for those cobra snakes. And of course that defeated the object that the British officials wanted straight away. They understood that the numbers of cobras would decrease, and actually that wasn't the case. So they stopped the scheme straight away. But then, of course, the people who've been breeding all these cobras had these cobras and nothing to do with them. There was no reason for them to keep the cobras at all. So the residents of Delhi who had been breeding the cobras set them free. And actually, in the end, there were more cobras in the city afterwards than there were before. And this Cobra effect, as it's called, is actually an example which is used across the world these days as an intervention which made things worse and not better. Okay, so that's the first one where things went wrong. I would suggest that those British officials didn't follow the second step of my framework of understanding good judgment. They didn't have any empathy. Of course, that's another intellectual characteristic, but they didn't understand the impact that their decisions would make and would have on the people within the city. They needed to do a little bit more research first. So the successful example of good judgment that I want to talk to you about this morning is the story of US Airways Flight 1549. That was on in January 2009, and it was flying from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Charlotte. It was an internal flight within the US. And that plane had 155 passengers on board and was captained by Captain Chelsea Sullenberger. So just after takeoff, sadly, tragically, the plane flew into a flock of Canadian geese. And some of the geese went into the engines and the plane lost power in both of its engines. It only had 2 engines, so the flight actually lost power to all of its engines. So 3 minutes into the flight, at a height of 930 metres above New York and with no power, Captain Chelsea Sullenberger, known by his nickname of Sully, was faced with the task of trying to safely land his plane and stop it crashing, which would inevitably lead to the death of all of the people on board. Sully's first instinct was probably the obvious one. He tried to turn the plane back and head back to the airport that he'd come from LaGuardia Airport. And he sent a message to the airport that said, "We've lost thrust on both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia." The airport held all takeoffs and landings on its runway, and Sully made a judgment actually in the end that he couldn't get back to LaGuardia Airport. He would lose height too quickly, and so he decided that LaGuardia Airport was too far away. So then he suggested to the control tower that he might try to glide his massive plane. He might try and glide it to Teterboro Airport, another smaller airport that potentially looked a little bit easier to get to for the plane that had no power. Sully then made a judgment that actually he couldn't get there either, and he said to the air traffic controller, "We can't do it. We're going to be in the Hudson." I'd love to do an American accent there, but my American accents aren't very good. You'd end up just laughing at me. But anyway, Sully made the decision that he couldn't get to either LaGuardia Airport or Teterboro Airport, and his only choice, his judgment, was to try and land his plane, his massive double-engine jet with 155 people on it. He was going to land this in the Hudson River. The Hudson River is one of the waterways that surrounds Manhattan in New York, the island of Manhattan. Very, very brave decision. The radio to the air traffic controller then went silent, but the controller could see the plane on his radar heading for the river. And the plane, travelling at 140 miles per hour, was travelling straight towards the river. And Sully gave the order, "Brace for impact." And he landed the plane actually on the Hudson River. Remarkably, all 155 people on the aircraft survived. The flight attendants described the landing as a hard landing, 1 impact, no bounce, and then a gradual deceleration. So actually it was quite a smooth landing in the end. I would urge you to Google it and see if you can find a picture. There's some great pictures out there of the plane actually in the river with all of the people lined up on the wings of the plane waiting for the boats to come and rescue them. From the moment that the geese hit the engines to the landing of the plane on the river was actually less than 4 minutes, less time than it's taken for me to tell you that story. Simulations afterwards concluded that the plane would have crashed if it had flown back to LaGuardia or Teterboro runways instead. And that's good judgment. Under extreme pressure, Sully made the right call, which actually saved 155 lives. His aim was clear. He was calm. He gained information from the cockpit about his surroundings. He decided what to do. He then acted with confidence. And the evaluation of the whole incident afterwards vindicated his judgment as being a good one. Some of you may have seen the movie that was made of the incident, which is called Sully. It stars Tom Hanks as the lead character. I recommend you watch it. It's a very good one. We can all learn a lot from Sully's calmness, from his wise analysis, and from his good judgment. Thank you ever so much for listening this morning. I hope you all have a great week.